Welcome to CIA Declassified. In the aftermath of the Second World War and the dawn of the Cold War, the perceived vulnerability of the United States drove the intelligence community to seek radical, preemptive solutions. The fear of deep penetration by foreign intelligence was paramount, leading to executive directives that stretched the ethical and legal boundaries of surveillance. Project Gondola Wish was born from this mandate. The initial authorization, though classified, was referenced in the subsequent 1975 internal review. It allowed for, quote, exploratory research into non-conventional methods of intelligence gathering on hostile state actors, end quote. However, the scope quickly expanded. This is a quote from the internal review, CIA Office of Security, 1975, referencing the 1953 directive. Quote, the initial directive provided explicit, though tightly controlled, authority for the use of novel psychological and acoustic techniques in overseas counterintelligence. Due to an operational ambiguity, this was subsequently interpreted by Project Gondola Wish leaders to include the establishment of domestic baseline measurements for comparison, resulting in the non-consensual monitoring of unindicted American citizens, end quote. The core bureaucratic failure was this deliberate misinterpretation of the word baseline. To monitor foreign actors, the project argued, they needed to perfectly understand the normal behavior of domestic populations. This justification became the illegal gateway to domestic surveillance. The IG report noted that the project was shielded by several layers of compartmentalization, which deliberately obscured its domestic application from high-level review. The second major phase of Project Gondola Wish focused on creating comprehensive psychological profiles, utilizing techniques that today would be classified as severe ethical violations. The project theorized that environmental stressors or subtle acoustic triggers could reliably differentiate a foreign agent operating under deep cover from an ordinary citizen. Researchers involved with Gondola Wish established multiple non-consensual testing sites, primarily in public waiting areas, libraries, and university campuses, all disguised as routine public works or research efforts. A quote from the Declassified Gondola Wish Protocol Summary from 1961. Protocols involved the introduction of controlled environmental variables, specifically calibrated low-frequency acoustic fields below 20 Hz, and subliminal visual stimuli to ascertain reliable biometric and behavioral responses. Target subjects were categorized based on deviations from established norms in areas such as conversational pacing, sustained eye contact, and reaction time to unexpected stimuli. This process was deemed necessary to establish the psychological signature library, end quote. The non-consensual aspect was the project's most damning ethical breach. Individuals were targeted based on a generalized population pool, not any specific evidence of criminal activity. Project documents confirm the subjects were monitored for periods lasting up to 6 months, often without their knowledge. The findings, though scientifically dubious, created a massive unauthorized database of personal and behavioral information on thousands of American citizens. The IG investigation later determined that the human cost of the anxiety and distress induced by these controlled variables was significant, yet completely disregarded by the project leaders. The technical advancements pioneered by Project Gondola Wish were revolutionary, focusing on penetrating the physical boundaries of private space without physical entry. This segment was entirely focused on two key technologies: microacoustic sensors and resonant frequency testing. Microacoustic sensors. These specialized devices were developed to capture conversations through walls, relying on vibrational analysis. The IG report detailed the operational success and deployment. This is a quote from the technical findings section. The development of the Type B acoustic resonator was a technical triumph. It was small enough to be concealed within standard wall fixtures, lighting controls, or electrical sockets, and could remotely detect subtle vibrations on the exterior wall of a building. It transmitted clear, intelligible audio from distances up to 20 feet with only a 15% noise distortion factor. Deployment involved unauthorized installation in numerous domestic locations deemed areas of interest by project managers. End quote. and resonant frequency testing. This was the project's most invasive technique, based on the theory that every physical structure and human organ has a natural resonant frequency. Scientists experimented with directed energy. The goal was to detect the human physiological response to specific targeted frequencies using the body itself as a biological sensor. The IG report confirmed that tests utilizing electromagnetic frequencies to track minute physiological changes were conducted again on non-consenting subjects in areas of domestic surveillance. This research laid the groundwork for future remote biometric tracking though the methodology was deeply unethical. Project Gondola Wish was a black budget operation, and its funding structure was a textbook example of oversight failure. The total expenditure for the 2-decade run of the program was estimated at $35 million in mid-century dollars, hundreds of millions today. And the IG report documented the systemic evasion of financial scrutiny. The project utilized shell corporations and university research grants to launder and disseminate funds. This created a layer of plausible deniability, but it also meant that no external accounting was ever performed. A quote from that Inspector General's report, Financial Mismanagement Appendix: a significant portion of Project Gondola Wish funding was channeled through 2 specific proprietary companies acting as cutouts for materials procurement. This mechanism allowed for the purchase of specialized equipment, including the Type B acoustic resonator components, without standard federal acquisition regulation oversight. Quarterly financial summaries submitted to congressional subcommittees were deliberately vague, listing expenditures under general headings such as foreign technical hardware development and advanced biometric research. This systemic evasion prevented any functional audit, end quote. The result was a project running entirely without the financial checks mandated by the National Security Act. This fiscal negligence allowed the domestic surveillance operations to continue unimpeded. The IG concluded that the failure to establish mandatory multi-agency financial oversight, given the highly sensitive nature of the research, represented a, quote, gross and willful dereliction of duty by project directors, end quote. The long-running unauthorized operation finally began to unravel in the early 1970s. The internal system, though designed to protect the project, eventually produced its own critics. The turning point was a junior analyst within the Office of Secretary who, in 1972, noted discrepancies in travel records related to the domestic testing sites. The analyst, whose name remains partially redacted in public filings, provided classified documentation to a single trusted superior, bypassing the direct Gondola Wish chain of command. This initiated a slow, highly resisted internal review. A quote from the Commission of Inquiry into Project Gondola Wish. Final findings. This is the testimony section. Testimony confirms that upon notification of the internal review in 1973, Project Director Redacted issued an immediate, unauthorized, and verbal order to commence the destruction of all behavioral and acoustic data gathered on U.S. citizens. This was a clear attempt to obstruct justice. The rapid intervention by the Inspector General's team, utilizing the presidential executive order against document destruction, only partially salvaged the historical record, end quote. The salvaged documents, though incomplete, were sufficient to confirm the scope of the non-consensual domestic testing. The internal dissent and subsequent cover-up attempt provided the necessary political ammunition for a full external investigation. This internal crisis finally forced the hand of congressional leaders who had long suspected overreach. The paper trail, though burned at the edges, was now clear enough to demand a public reckoning. When the full scope of Project Gondola Wish's domestic operations was revealed, the resulting legal and ethical shockwave was seismic. Thousands of previously monitored Americans realized their privacy had been systematically violated for years. The human cost was devastating. Affected individuals reported high levels of anxiety, psychological distress, and in some cases severe paranoia stemming from the realization that their most private moments had been recorded and analyzed. A quote from 1976 on the human impact assessment from the Commission of Inquiry into Project Gondola Wish. The psychological assessment revealed chronic stress, feelings of vulnerability, and severe distrust in government institutions among identified surveillance targets. Litigation against the government was complicated by the difficulty of proving direct specific harm from the low-frequency acoustic fields or environmental triggers. However, the Department of Justice ultimately settled several hundred claims based on the incontrovertible violation of privacy rights established by the project's own declassified installation logs. End quote. These settlements, though often undisclosed, represented a tacit admission of legal and ethical fault by the U.S. government. Critically, the Commission report cited the project's flagrant disregard for informed consent and established privacy precedents as the primary source of moral failure, paving the way for future judicial rulings restricting government surveillance power. The fallout from Project Gondola Wish, alongside other contemporaneous revelations, proved to be the final catalyst for fundamental binding change in the relationship between intelligence agencies and the American public. The revelations gave immense political momentum to the landmark congressional investigations led by Senator Frank Church and Congressman Otis Pike. The ensuing legislative action focused on imposing strict enforceable limits on domestic activities. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act precedent, while FISA was later codified, the Gondola Wish revelations established the critical need for a judicial or external review process for any intelligence gathering involving U.S. citizens. The IG report noted that the complete absence of a warrant system for Project Gondola Wish was the most immediate legislative target. Mandatory reporting and oversight committees. The congressional reforms mandated the creation of permanent, specialized intelligence oversight committees within both the House and the Senate. A quote from the congressional record from 1978 referencing post-gondola mandates. The intelligence community is hereby mandated to report all domestic operations, including surveillance and behavioral testing, to the Select Oversight Committee of the House and Senate. Failure to disclose any such activity will result in the immediate and permanent suspension of funding and criminal prosecution for obstruction of Congress. This provision is directly attributable to the failures of the Gondola Wish project, end quote. The legacy of Gondola Wish became the primary institutional example cited by lawmakers to justify these new aggressive oversight measures, ensuring that the self-policing failures of the previous decades could never be repeated without immediate external accountability. Project Gondola Wish ended decades ago, but its scars, both on the affected individuals and on the public's perception of government power, remain visible. It stands as a chilling nonfiction case study in how the institutional desire for total security can easily override fundamental civil liberties when oversight fails. The files, though sanitized, confirm a profound truth. A small group of individuals, driven by fear and an unchecked mandate, were able to use taxpayer money and technological prowess to illegally monitor and test American citizens. The enduring impact is the erosion of trust. Even today, discussions of government surveillance, from acoustic monitoring to social media pattern analysis, are framed by the cautionary tale of projects like Gondola Wish. It is the permanent evidence that intelligence agencies, when not held accountable, can possess as great a threat to the freedoms they are meant to protect as any foreign adversary. Next time on CIA Declassified, we move from surveillance to signals intelligence. We dive into the true story of the Black Chamber's last stand, the period immediately following the NSA's official formation. We will analyze the specific declassified intercepts that exposed the most successful foreign espionage network in the early Cold War, tracing the linguistic and cryptological breakthroughs that changed the game. We break down the technical documents detailing the transition from human code breaking to automated signals processing, a technological leap that was fueled entirely by the fear of one devastating successful breach. That's the story of the Black Chamber's last stand. That's our next episode. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.